In this video, I'm going to be ranking every single creature in Ark Survival Evolved and Ascended from worst to best. Just so you know, this is going to be from a PvE perspective, and I hope you guys do enjoy this video. In last place, we had the Leech. I mean, you can tame this one, but it does nothing. I don't even think you can access its inventory or feed it, so it's pretty much just completely useless, and there's no reason to tame one, but you can. And number 157 is the Coelacanth. You can also tame this one, and it does nothing at all. It just exists in the world. It is kind of nice to have them. It's not as disgusting as the Leech, so I guess it's better than the Leech in that way. And number 156 is the Troodon. This one just kind of sucks. I mean, I guess it's kind of useful, probably more useful than some of the things above it, but the thing is, it's just so hard to tame. You basically have to feed it your own, like, baby creatures, or just your own creatures, but they have to be like on neutral, and the only way to really tame it is by giving it like baby gigas, because it only wants the best food to tame, so it's really like agonizing to try and tame and all of that, and it's not even that useful at all. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty low on the list. And after that, at 155, we have the Compy, the first shoulder pet on this list, and one that pretty much does absolutely nothing. And I think you need prime meat to tame it. You can't even tame it with regular meat, which just makes it a little bit harder to tame in the early game and makes it a little bit more annoying to tame in the early game. At number 154, I have the Ichthyornis. One of the reasons it's so low is just because I despise these things, but also it has an ability. It basically, you can throw it out and then it will go grab fish for you and basically turn it into prime meat. And I think it actually increases the use for when you tame otters and stuff, but it doesn't work on Ark Ascended at all, even though the game's been out for like 10 months now. It does work on Ark Survival Evolved, and this video is for both, so I mean, it works if you're playing Ark Survival Evolved but not Ascended. I don't like this thing either way, and I don't find that ability very useful at all, so yeah. And number 153 is the Saber-Toothed Salmon. You could say that the Ichthyornis is better than the Saber-Toothed Salmon, but I don't like the Ichthyornis, so I'm going to put the Saber-Toothed Salmon above it. And then the Mega Piranha after that, number 152. I mean, technically better than the Saber-Toothed Salmon because it's a little bit stronger, so I guess you could probably make a pack of these things and maybe kill some underwater stuff. I don't know, I've never done that, and I don't think you would, which is why it's like the top 10 worst creatures in the game, or in this top 10. And number 151 is the Trilobite. I have this one above because, I mean, all these creatures have been pretty much useless. This one, I think it's just funny to have a Trilobite in your base. Like, I tame these things just for the gags, just to have a Trilobite. So, I mean, that's the only reason it's above everything else on the list. At number 150 is the Eels. These things just suck. First off, they're really annoying to tame because they're hyper-aggressive, passive tames. You can use the Basilosaurus to make it a bit easier to tame them, but it's still really annoying. And once you do, you get a creature that's not even that useful because you can't ride it, and you can just, I don't know, make them attack stuff, but then they're just going to get killed instantly. They just suck. And number 149 is the Onyx. You can tame them. They're passive tames, and they don't really do anything, so you can just have them, I don't know, as pets. There's better bats in the game you can tame, so I don't know why you'd want to tame the Onyx at all. It doesn't really have much of a purpose in the game. At 148 is the Aberrant. This one kind of just sucks. It's better than everything so far because it actually has some purpose. You can shoot webs with it, and it deals a little bit of damage, but it's still not the best creature in the game. I mean, people have been saying it's a TLC for years, and I definitely agree, is nobody really tames the Aberrant. They just suck. And number 147 is the Titanoboa. This one used to be more useful because when they did make it tameable, it wasn't really tameable for the longest time, but then they made it where you could tame it with eggs, and then you could get Titanoboa eggs and use it for kibble back when the old kibble system. But now that they have the new kibble system, this thing is pretty much useless. You don't need it for kibble, as there's a lot other creatures you could use that are way easier than the Titanoboa, so you don't really need this thing for anything. You can't ride it, so I don't know. It's probably even generous putting it this high, but this is where it is. At 146 is the Microraptor, another shoulder pet that pretty much does nothing. It has one ability where you can throw it out, and then it will kind of go stun the thing in front of you. I've never really used it though, and it's more useful in PvP, which of course this is a PvE list, so not really that useful of a shoulder pet. It's kind of just, I don't know, it's not really that great. And number 145 is the Lamprey. You can tame this thing, but it has one major ability that is actually kind of useful. I never really used it that much personally, but you can use it. It basically works as like resistance to radiation. So if it latches onto you, you have like 400 or 500 seconds where you can be resistant to radiation. So if you don't have a hazard suit on Aberration, this one can be useful. It's a very small use case, but it's just okay. And after that, at 144 is the Patchy. I've never really found this thing that useful. You could kind of like headbutt things and do a little bit of torpor, but it's not really that useful at all. At 143 is the Hyenodon. This one is a little bit annoying to tame because you have to go up to behind it and pet it, and if you mess it up once, then it loses all of its taming, so it's kind of annoying to tame, and once you do, you can't ride it or anything. You basically could just put a meat pack on it, and that'll make it to where meat spoils like less on it. It's just an okay ability. I mean, all carnivores do that, except for I think this one does it a little bit better. But I'd rather just put it in like a preserving bin or a refrigerator or something. I don't know, it's not that great of an ability. I think most people will agree with me on that. And at 142 is the Patchy Rhinoceros. This one is pretty useless. I don't think I've heard anybody tame this thing before. I know I've tamed them, but they're pretty useless. They do have a few abilities though. You can like basically put out gases that make it to where you're invisible, and then other ones that make it to where everything attacks you. I still have never really heard of anyone using this thing though. Next at 141 is the Purlovia. This one is not really that useful. It's a knockout tame, so it's not insanely hard to tame, but it's not really that great. You can kind of use it as a hidden storage, but that's really only useful on PvP because it can burrow on the ground, but you can't ride it. I feel like this thing would be a lot more useful if you could ride it. They showed someone like using a saddle on it in the Arc animated series, which is kind of annoying because I'd like to be able to put a saddle and ride this thing in regular Arc, but you can't do that, so that kind of sucks. Next up at 140 is the Hesperornis, another shoulder pet. This one, some people probably put it higher for its ability. I never really use its ability that much. It basically lays golden eggs, and you can use those to make certain types of kibble. But I don't really find myself using the Hesperornis that much, so I'm not really going to have it that high. And as a shoulder pet, it's not really the greatest either. At 139 is the Pegomastax, another shoulder pet, and I think this one's just okay. I mean, I don't really like these things in the wild at all. They're super annoying, but you can tame them super easily. I actually find myself accidentally taming them all the time because they just steal my stuff and auto tame. So I find myself just having them, and with the shoulder pets having just the regular ability to reduce weight by 50%, I guess it's just okay to accidentally tame one of these super early game and kind of use it as a just way to hold the resources and stuff. It can also steal things from other players, but that's only useful in PvP and not in PvE. At 138 is the Dillo. This one's a super easy early game tame that can just kind of deal some damage and maybe defend yourself in the early game stages. I mean, other than that, that's pretty much the only use it has. And you can also use it for eggs, I guess, for simple kibble, so I guess that's just okay. At 137 is the Calicotherium. This one, there's one reason why I have it super low. It's just because the taming method, you have to use beer, which there's only... Well, this is the only creature that takes beer in the game to tame. They're going to add one later, the Dinotherium, but right now this is the only one that takes beer, so getting beer, it's kind of annoying. You can find them in supply drops in Ark Survival Ascended, so I guess that makes it easier, but the thing is you just have to go out of your way to get it, and once you tame it, in PvE anyway, there's not really much of a use for this thing, especially because it's kind of like a mid to late game tame, and by that time you don't really need this for anything. It's got the boulders that are really strong, so I guess you can use that to kill things, but it's not the greatest. At 136 is the Arthroplora. This one is not really the most useful one either. It's kind of annoying to tame as it's a passive tame, but it's not the hardest thing in the world. But it's kind of, I don't know, you get the spit, but it's more of a PvP thing because the spit does damage to armor, and then it does like damage to tech structures, but once again, not very useful in PvE. It's just an alright creature, but it does have recoil damage when things hit you, so I guess you can use that to kind of defend yourself. Next up, we have the Noglin. This one might be a little bit of a controversial one, but once again, I feel like this is more of a PvP-oriented creature. The ability to, like, mind control is really cool. I do like it a lot, but in order to tame the Noglin, it's super hard. This is, like, definitely a late-game creature to tame, and by the time you're that late in the game, I don't think you need the mind control for anything in PvE. I mean, you could use the mind control to, like, mind control something that's attacking you or something like that, but once again, I feel like that would be more of an early game use, and this is a super late game tame, so the Noglin is just not that useful in PvE. I do really like the mind control ability though. I think it's a really cool idea, just not that great. At 134 is the Kentro. This one, I mean, it's not really that hard to tame. You just kind of knock it out and tame it, and you can't ride it or anything. It does have recoil damage though, and they are pretty strong, so you can use these things to kind of defend your, I guess, base. Maybe you can defend from other creatures attacking. That's pretty much all they're good for, I think, though. At 133 is the Diplodocus. This one is hated on quite a lot, and I do understand it. I do like it a little bit more than most people, but that's just a little bit. I still think this thing's pretty useless, as you can't really deal any damage with it, but it actually does move pretty quickly, and the Team Cedar Saddle is kind of fun. You can just get a bunch of people on it. You can get up to 10 people, and then just go around the map kind of like a bus. It's kind of fun, but still not that great, so it's going to be really low on this main list. And at 132 is the Carbonimes, or the Giant Turtle. This one is not really that great. I mean, you can tame it early game, and you could kind of have it to preserve like items and stuff. That's what I've used it for. You can put a saddle on it, and it's really slow. It's really tanky though. That's pretty good. You can tank a lot of damage with it, so that's probably the only really good thing going for it, and why it's so high. I mean, it's not really high on the list at all. It's at 130, but higher than all the other things so far. At 131 is the Caprasuchus. I never really tamed these things, but they are just pretty decent. You can kind of like boost forward with them really quickly, so you can kind of use them as like a travel mount almost, because they are pretty quick and they're decently strong. But they are kind of annoying to tame because they're in the swamps, and you could, I mean, they are like knockouts, but like the swamp's really dangerous. The thing's really dangerous to try and tame, so I don't think it's the easiest thing to tame. It's kind of more of a mid-game creature, and by the time I'm mid-game, I don't think I need it as much. I'd rather just use like a other flyer or something like that. At 130 is the Archaeopteryx. This one is, it's got a fun mechanic. Basically, you can jump off things and glide really far, which can be useful. You can use it to steal wyvern eggs and stuff. I've seen people use, even though that does seem kind of hard to pull off, but you can use it for that. And of course, you can glide with it, but you can't really use anything while you're gliding with it, so that severely limits the use of this thing, because you can't really just bring it around with you everywhere you go, because you can't do anything while you're holding it. I mean, you could like ride creatures, I guess, but it's not really that useful. It has like certain uses that are really fun and really cool to use, but I mean, overall it's not really the greatest. And number 129 is the Giant Bee. This one you can use to get honey by making a beehive. Now, I like to get bee honey by just using a dire bear. I think that's definitely the best way to go about it. I mean, you do have to go out and get it every time. This way you can kind of just have it made passively, but it's kind of a pain. I don't know, but it's okay. I mean, you can get honey. It's still pretty good. Definitely better than everything so far. And at 128 is the Amargasaurus. This is a really cool looking creature, and I definitely like it in the world, but as a tame creature, it's more of a PvP one. All the abilities are like oriented towards PvP, which aren't really useful in PvE at all. It has one use where you can put its like spikes and sap tap tree taps, and it makes it more efficient. So that's pretty much like the only use you have for this thing in PvE, which is why it's so low on the list. At 127 is the Ovis. This is the sheep, and the only use is killing it. You basically just tame it, and then you breed them together, but you have to have sweet veggie cakes, so you can't even tame this thing early game. You get it kind of late game because of the sweet veggie cakes needed. But yeah, you can use this to get a bunch of mutton. That's pretty much the only use it has. It's a pretty decent use, but like I said, it's kind of lower on the list just because the only use it has is getting mutton. After that, at 126 is the Achatina. This one you also need sweet veggie cakes to tame, but it makes mending paste passively, which you can collect, so I guess that is pretty useful if you just want to get some easy mending paste. And at 125 is the Dung Beetle. This one has a similar kind of use, is it passively makes like a fertilizer using oil and stuff, but it has to be on water, so you gotta kind of like put it in a cage and stuff, but you can use it to make fertilizer, which is super useful, but that's like the only thing it is used for. And you can also make fertilizer with like compost bins. This isn't the only way to make fertilizer, it's just one that a lot of people think is easier, so you could use these things to make it. And after that is the Megachelon. This one is a really cool creature, but I just don't find myself using it too much, as it is insanely hard to tame, so it's really late game. And once, of course, you do get it, I mean, you could build on the back of it, but you probably already have a base. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have any specific uses for it. It does passively make mushrooms, rare mushrooms, and rare flowers, so that's pretty useful. You can pretty much have unlimited of rare flowers and rare mushrooms once you tame this thing, so that's pretty good. And it's just overall kind of a cool creature, but that's about it for the Megachelon. At 123 is the Leoplorodon. This one is another cool creature that sadly isn't that useful in the game, mainly because once you tame it, you only have it for 30 minutes and then it disappears, which really sucks. It basically gives you a 6-hour buff that allows you to get better loot on loot crates. Some people say it doesn't even really help that much, but it's kind of just up to the player, I guess. But it does help a little bit with better loot crates. So this creature basically isn't even a creature, it's just a 6-hour buff, and the buff is a good buff, but I don't think it's worth it for the creature. And number 122 is the Gallimimus. This is like a really fast creature with a 3-seater saddle, but I don't know if I've ever really used it that much. I guess you could, if you want to move 3 people around and travel across the map, that very specific use case, you need to get around really fast, you can use this thing, and for some reason you just can't use flyers, but that's about it. On 121 is the Dimetrodon. This one has one function, and it basically acts as a AC unit, so you can throw eggs around it and they will incubate, so that is pretty cool. You can use it as like an early game AC if you don't have access to an AC unit. You can tame one of these things and use it. But once you get an AC unit, this thing is kind of useless. At 120 is the Kairuku. These ones you can also use as incubators, just not really as effective. They have insulation when you get near them. You can also get like a pack of them and kill stuff. I don't know if anyone's really done that before, but I mean, these things aren't too useful. They're just kind of cute pets to have, so they kind of get a bias because they're cute. At 119 is the Dodo. Now, some people would argue that this should be number 1, and maybe it should be, but you know, we're just gonna have it at number 119. But in reality, I mean, you can use these things to get a bunch of eggs early game. I think that's kind of useful. I mean, I mainly just kill them for hide, but you can have them as little pets and carry them around. You can get tons of eggs because it's super easy to get it that way. And at 118 is the Lystrosaur, another small creature. This one you can actually use to give an XP buff. If you pet it, it will give an XP buff around you. So that's pretty useful for XP buffs, especially in the early game. This thing's super easy to tame early game, and you could use it to just get some easy XP out of it. Next up, at number 117 is the Manta. This one's not the best underwater creature, but I've always thought it was fun. I never disliked this thing. It's cool you can jump out of the water, but you gotta be careful because if you even touch land, if a single fin hits the land, you just instantaneously die, like no mercy at all. So you gotta be careful about that. But other than that, it's pretty cool. You can jump around. You can go pretty quick. You can actually out swim a lot of creatures underwater, which is nice. So you can do that, but it does take angler gel to tame, so that means you need to go to the deep ocean just to be able to tame this thing. I feel like it'd be more useful early game. It's kind of like a mid-game underwater creature I don't find myself using too much. It's just okay. At 116 is the Vulture. I feel like always people don't like my rankings of these things. I mean, they're just okay. They do have one good use. They can deal damage off of your shoulder, so they can attack while on your shoulder. But I've heard a lot of people say that it makes it to where meat spoils faster, but they actually don't do that. I've tested it on Ark Survival Evolved and Ascended, and it doesn't work. But it would be cool if I did that. It just works like every other carnivore, where it's kind of basically just makes it last longer. The meat lasts longer is what I'm trying to say. But this thing's just okay. Like I said, it's not the best shoulder pet. I think there's better shoulder pets on Scorched Earth, where the map is from, so that I would rather use. At 115 is the Pumleoscorpius. I've always actually really liked this thing. I don't know why. It's just kind of cool to ride on a giant scorpion. And it's pretty decent. It's really easy to tame. You can kind of get it early game. You can saddle it up and then ride around. And you can do a little bit of damage. And you can do some torpor too. I remember people used to use these back to knock out Quetzals with their RGs. But I don't think that's really a strategy anymore. But they're just okay. Honestly, I do like them. But I can't really put them super high because they are kind of weak. But whatever. And 114 is the Lymantria, the lowest flyer on this list. So you can fly around with it, but the stamina is super weak, and it doesn't really have a bite attack. It only has the fart bubble that it shoots out that will basically suffocate you to death. But not really to death, as it doesn't really do that much damage. But you can use this early game to try and get wyvern eggs, even though it's kind of hard to, because wyverns can catch up to you, so you got to be a little bit stealthy about it. But you could use it for that. That's the only reason it's as high as it is you can probably try and get wyvern eggs with it. 113 is the Ferox. This one, always thought was really cool, but just isn't really as useful as I thought it would be when they first announced it. It's basically like a shapeshifter, as you just saw there. It's a shoulder pet, but you can throw it off your shoulder, and if you feed it element, it will basically transform into that, and it's got its little addiction meter. It only lasts for like 5 minutes or so. The more you feed it, the more addicted it gets, the stronger it gets, and the longer it lasts. But you have to feed it more and more element, which isn't exactly cheap, as element isn't exactly easy to get, which is why I don't have this thing very highly ranked. Is I can't just like throw it off my shoulder real quick, like if I'm being attacked, and then just use it. Like I have to have element on me to be able to do that, which I don't really just have element on me all the time, especially in the earlier game. Maybe in late game I do, but I don't really use this thing in that late game. As the like Ferox version of it isn't insanely strong, I feel like it could be like I don't know, like Carnos or the Rexes or anything is going to be a lot stronger than this thing. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I just don't think it's the greatest. At 112 is the Terror Bird. This one, I mean, it's just okay. You can kind of get it like a little early to mid-game, probably more of a mid-game creature. It's decently fast, you can outrun a lot of creatures, and it has the flap ability, which is unique to this one. Actually, there's another creature that they just added a few months ago that has this ability now, but it was unique for a while. You can kind of just float and glide like this. It just does okay damage, but there's a lot of like smaller creatures like this that I feel like are just a lot better, like the Direwolf and the Saber, and a ton of other ones. And at number 11, or 111, is the Fenrir. This one is a really cool creature, and it's a lot, like, probably better than the Direwolf and all these other creatures, but the problem is you need to kill Fenrir, the Fenrir Sulfur, in order to get it, so you have to be insanely late game, as that boss isn't exactly easy to get, because you have to defeat, like, 6 or 7 bosses before you get to that boss, and then once you defeat it, you get this creature in a cryopod. It does have one good use, and it actually, you can refrigerate Nameless Venom and other things that you normally couldn't fit in a refrigerator. But it kind of sucks that the awesome Fenrir is basically locked to just being a refrigerator creature. At 110 is the Megalania. This one is a cool one. It's really unique. You can climb on pretty much any surface you want and get around that way. It's kind of fun, but at the same time, there's not too many like areas where I'd actually need to use a Megalania. You could use it in some caves, I think, and that would be really fun, but not insanely useful. Next up at 109 is the Megaloceros. Now I see a lot of people saying that this one's pretty much useless and it's not very good, but there's one use I think it has, and it's kind of underrated for that, and it's the ability to harvest thatch. If you have the version that has horns, you can actually harvest a ton of thatch. Now I know it's not as useful as it used to be. This used to be like the main creature for getting thatch, and I still remember when that was, so there's probably other creatures you can use like the Stego and Mammoth, but at the same time this one's not super hard to tame, and if you can get access to taming it early game, it's a really great way of just farming a ton of thatch to the point where you don't really need any more at all. And number 108 is the Desert Titan. Now this one is interesting because of course it's like a boss pretty much that you can tame, but the reason it's lower is it basically has one use. All the Titans do, and it's you use them for the King Titan fight, except for this is probably the worst for the King Titan fight, and one that I actually just skip out on taming whenever I fight the King Titan. I don't find it really worth it at all. It is kind of fun to build on the back of it, honestly. The thing is, the Titans only last for 24 hours if you're on an official server. If you're on like single player or you have your own custom settings, you can make it last infinitely. When you do that, it's actually really fun to like try and build bases on the back of this thing or something. That's the only reason I really have it this high. I mean, it's just a cool, massive creature. You can kill pretty much anything you need to with it, because it's a Titan after all, and the abilities are kind of fun, but at the same time, it's very niche use cases. And after that, we have the Gigantopithecus, which is like the Bigfoot creature. This one's pretty fun. It can gather fiber. Of course, fiber is really useful, which you can get this creature kind of like mid-game. You can gather fiber. You can gather tons of berries. You can throw yourself. You can go on zip lines if you're on Aberration, which is a nice bonus. And it's just decently strong, but it's not the best creature in the game by any means, so it's just okay. At 106 is the Titanosaur. This one's similar to the Desert Titan, where you only have it for 24 hours unless you change your settings. It's really hard to tame. It's a super late game one. This one's mainly useful for PvP. I should have mentioned that about the Desert Titan. Of course, those creatures are going to be more useful in PvP than PvE, which is why the Desert Titan wasn't very high, and is why the Titanosaur isn't very high either. Is these ones are more of like raiding style creatures that you just don't really need that much in PvE, but building a base on the back of them is pretty fun, and you can kill stuff with it too if you want to go fight like Gigas, or if you're on Ragnarok you want to go kill Deathworms with it. I mean, you can kind of go have some fun and destroy everything. And after that, we have the Thorny Dragon. This one is pretty good. It's great for harvesting wood on scorched earth, but once you get the chainsaw, it's kind of useless. But I mean, if you're in an area where you need wood and there's thorny dragons around, you can tame one up and go get some pretty easy, as it has a weight reduction on it too. It's also pretty good at defending itself. It's pretty strong, and it has the like narcotic inducing like thorns that it can shoot out of its tail, so it's pretty decent. And number 104 is the Mesopithecus. Even though this one is really, like, you know, in the hundreds when it comes to the list, I still think it's one of the better shoulder pets. Obviously, the shoulder pets are going to rank lower than a lot of the main creatures just because they're not as useful as them, even though you do use them a lot. What I'm trying to say is the shoulder pets are still good, even though they are ranked low. Like the Mesopithecus, I think is one of the better ones, mainly because it has the ability to throw poop off of its shoulder, which sounds dumb, but I mean, it's pretty awesome because it stuns the creatures for a little bit, makes them slow down. So if you're being chased or if you're being attacked by something, this thing will throw poop at it and kind of defend you, and it will just help just a little bit to try and kill that thing for you. Next up at 103 is the Carno. This one's just pretty good. I mean, it has the like main attack, which does some decent damage. You can kind of tame this thing mid-game, and they updated this thing like a few years ago to give it a bleed attack, which I think really helped it out. So you can do bleed attacks with this thing to try and kill, and you can use it to like kill alphas and stuff in the mid-game with that bleed. So that's pretty good. It's decent for travel, I guess, too. I mean, it's just like a pretty good mid-game creature for meat runs and killing when you don't have access to like Rexes and other stuff like that. And 101 is the Oviraptor. This one is pretty good, and with Ark Survival Ascended, it's had a bit of a buff to make it a lot better, which is why it's higher than everything else so far. Its main ability is it can pick up eggs around it, which is super useful if you're doing a bunch of breeding. It will automatically pick up the the fertilized eggs that drop around it, so you can pick them up and have them all stored in there without having to manually go over there and pick them up every time they lay an egg, and so they don't despawn and you end up losing the eggs. So that kind of prevents that. So that's why the Oviraptor is really good. And number 100 is the Woolly Rhino. This one is pretty good. A lot of people use it for boss fights. If you have people riding one, so basically if you want to use it for a boss fight, someone has to be riding it, and then you need to have like a ton of people to ride each one. But you can use that charge attack to basically annihilate bosses. I've never really done it, but I've heard a lot of people do it, and people like that strategy quite a lot, so I thought I'd put it higher just for that. But they are pretty strong. The like charge attack does a ton of damage, so you can do a lot of damage with that, and overall it's just a pretty good creature. It's mainly for boss fighting uses though. I guess now we're in the top 100, and at number 99 is the Diplodocus. This is a pretty good early game tame if you can manage to get it, because it basically gives you oxygen. It's like an early game scuba tank, so you don't have to build a scuba tank. You can just breathe out of this thing. I don't know how you're breathing out of it. I wouldn't ask questions, but you can, and it's also super fast. You can outrun pretty much anything underwater with it, which is why it's so good in the early game. So the only problem is it doesn't really do any damage, so if you're trying to get in a fight at all, you're not going to succeed. You're just going to get mauled to death, so I wouldn't recommend fighting with this thing. But other than that, I mean, it's pretty good. And number 98 is the Phoenix. This thing is pretty decent, but the problem is it's really hard to tame, and it's super hard to find. I mean, they are really rare. I think they're more common in Ark Survival Ascended, as I never even saw one in Ark Survival Evolved, but I have in Ark Ascended. But yeah, they only come up during heat waves, and you got to use fire to tame them. Once you do have them, I mean, they're not the greatest flyer ever. They don't really have that much weight or anything, but they can go pretty fast, and they deal fire damage. They also smelt metal ingots and cooked meat, but like I said, they're just so late game. I feel like by the time you tame this thing, you can have a lot better flyers, which is why it's one of the lowest flyers on the list so far. And number 97 is the Dimorphodon. I think this one's a pretty good shoulder pet. It's pretty easy to tame, as you can find them all around a lot of the maps, and they're just a simple knockout. And then, of course, once you do get them, you can use them as a shoulder pet. They're really strong, and of course, they're kind of hard to hit because they're flying in the air. So you can actually use them to defend yourself if you like throw them off your shoulder, or you can like make a little pack of them, and you could annihilate things with them as well. I think the Dimorphodon is a pretty good shoulder pet overall. But after that, number 96 is the Ceratosaurus. For those who don't know, because I get comments about it every time, they did add some of the Ark Editions creatures to Ark Ascended, and the Ceratosaurus is one of them. To be fair, I think the Ceratosaurus is more of a PvP-oriented creature with the abilities. It does have some good abilities, though, like being able to run insanely fast, as it kind of like boosts up over time. So you can see right here, and you destroy rocks and stuff as you go, which is kind of fun. It also has the healing mode, where if you deal damage, you heal. But this thing's also really hard to tame, and you have to go make its own type of item, and you got to kill other Ceratosauruses just to get the item in order to tame it. I feel like it's a very long process to try and tame it, and all of that I feel like makes it more of a late game tame, which by then I probably wouldn't use it. If I could get this more early to mid game, I think this thing would be insanely useful, but you can't really do that. At number 95 is the Paracer. Now, I know a lot of people don't really like this one as much anymore. I always thought this one was still pretty good, even though there's not too much uses for it anymore. I mean, you could use it to go get berries, but the platform saddle I think is fun. I always like building little bases on them or using them to like put maybe forges and stuff so I can like cook some metal and stuff. I think they're pretty fun to use, but to be fair, they're not the greatest creatures in the game anymore. At number 94 is the Zafactinus. This one is another Arc Editions creature. It's kind of funny how they're ended up being so close to each other because these were added in the same update, but this one also is just pretty good. It's really easy to tame, which I do like. It's just a simple knockout tame, and it's pretty quick, and it can deal some decent damage. Like overall, it's just a pretty good underwater creature, but it's not the best underwater creature. I think there's a lot of them that are better, but you know, this one's just decent. It can also jump out of the water, which is kind of fun to mess around with, and you can bring it on land too. But at number 93 is the Jerboa. This one is pretty much essential for Scorched Earth, as it tells you when weather events are going to happen, which is insanely useful because that can like save you from being caught in storms, which could end up killing you, like superheats or maybe even sandstorms or all that other stuff. So this thing is just great to be able to, you know, tell when the weather events are happening. It's not as useful on other maps. It can actually tell you when earthquakes are coming on Aberration, but you know, it's not like a life or death situation there. So it's one of the best shoulder pets, especially for Scorched Earth. And number 92 is the Allosaurus. This one is a pretty decent creature. It's more of a later mid-game to late-game creature. I'd say it's more mid-game, but once again, another knockout tame. And if you get packs of them, they kind of have a boost. They do a lot of damage, and they have a bleed attack, so they're pretty good, mainly just in packs. You can deal some damage with them, but they're not the greatest creature ever. They're not really good enough to be brought into boss fights or anything, so they're just more kind of for killing creatures out in the wild, or maybe even bring them into some bigger caves you can use these things for. And number 91 is the Phiomia. Now this one is pretty much useless except for one use, and if you feed it a bunch of stem berries you get tons of feces, which is pretty much not like a necessity for making crops to make fertilizer. This is like the best way of getting it, which is why I have it so high compared to everything else. I think this is like one is pretty much essential, even though that's the only use it does have. That's just why I'm putting it so high on the list, even though it's still like in the 90s, but still. And number 90 is the Basilisk. Once again, this is more of a PvP oriented creature with its giant poison ball, and it's kind of meant for like raiding and stuff, but it still has some good uses in PvEs. It has actually weight reductions on a lot of resources, including like stone is a huge weight reduction on, so you can actually use this thing to move resources around. But it is really late game because you have to have like rock drake eggs to tame it, or you can use like wyvern eggs and stuff, but it's got to be like one of those top tier eggs in order to tame it, so it's not the easiest thing to get in the game, which is why I find it not to be one of the best creatures in the game. At number 89 is the Roll Rat. This one is pretty good on Aberration as it gathers a ton of wood, but there is another creature in Aberration that can gather wood, which of course we'll get into later, that makes it not as good, but I still think it's pretty good. I mean, if you move insanely fast with that rolling saddle, which is nice, you can kind of get around really quickly, and it's got weight reductions on that wood too, so that helps a lot with getting it. Overall, I mean, it's just a pretty good one for getting wood, and wood is a very useful resource, so. And number 88 is the Forest Titan. This one, like I mentioned with the Desert Titan, the Titans have very small use cases, but this one's actually a lot more useful because you can use this thing to fight the King Titan, and it does a ton of damage and is super good for that. I mean, you could kill pretty much anything you need to. You can farm corrupted hearts and stuff with this thing too, which I think is great to notice. Although you need tons of corrupted hearts for all the stuff on Extinction, and with the Forest Titan you can get it pretty well. And yeah, I think the Forest Titan is just one of the great Titans. But an 87 is the best Titan, which is the Ice Titan. This one does the most damage and is also the most mobile, as you can do the giant jump, which allows you to move super far. Definitely best for gathering corrupted hearts as well. You can go to the like I don't remember what it's called exactly, the dead zone in Extinction, and you can just farm a crap ton of corrupted hearts over there super easily. I mean, nothing's gonna touch you because you're on the back of an Ice Titan. And it's also the best for fighting the King Titan too, is it also has the spitball ability, so you can hit the King Titan without it even being able to hit you. So I think this one's the best all around Titan. And it's got the platform saddle too, you can build on the back if you want. Not the best for building a base on, but this one's pretty dope. At number 86 is the Fossolosuchus, one of the newer creatures in Ark Ascended. It's supposed to be exclusive to Scorched Earth, but it's on Aberration too in the surface, which I think is kind of cool actually. But the Fossolosuchus, it's really hard to tame, which I feel like it'd be more useful in the mid game, but you can't really get it in the mid game. So it's more later game, and I still think it's okay there. I mean, you could probably use it for some caves maybe, but it does have the like ability to go sink in the sand, and you could move around that way, which is really fun. And it's got the like sand tunneling thing where you go in a circle and suffocate things. Once again, this is more of a PvP oriented creature, I think. But it also has a great ability to gather flint, which is why I've put it a little bit higher. If you go into the like swimming mode and you hit rocks, this is pretty much like the best way to harvest flint in the entire game. I can't really think of any way that would be better than this. Like, you just get it so fast. And then like an Anki where you have to go individually hit all the rocks. With this, you can just plow through all of them super quickly and it instantly breaks all of them. So it gets a ton of flint, and that's pretty great. And number 85 is the Raptor. This one is pretty good. I mean, I know it seems like since it's at like 85, it might not sound like it's good, but honestly, we're getting into the pretty good creatures now, like the Fossolosuchus and stuff. I think they're pretty good. And of course, there's just a ton of creatures in Ark, so they're not going to be at the top of the list. I thought I'd mention that though, because some people might think that because it's at 85, it's bad. It does not mean that at all. It's actually pretty good for here. It's just some of the creatures get a lot better. Anyway, yeah. But the Raptor is really good. I mean, you can get it early game, super easy tame, and you can deal a lot of damage. Only problems is it doesn't really have a lot of weight, but it can move decently fast, and it can jump, which is kind of nice. So you can just deal some like decent damage early game with it. But of course, once you get out of the early game, these things are pretty much useless. But, you know, whatever. And then after that, we have the Enforcer. This one is pretty good too. It's like the early game creature for Extinction, except for it's a lot faster. You can jump with it too. You can teleport and climb on walls, which is super nice for getting around the city. And I mean, you get this on any map, it's great for travel. And it also deals like 4x damage to corrupted creatures, which is super nice, especially if you want to try and tackle some like orbital supply drops in the early game. I wouldn't recommend doing the harder ones, but if you want to do some like easy ones, maybe the Enforcer would help. With that, I don't know. It's great for killing corrupted creatures, though, in the early game. At number 83 is the Plesiosaur. Now, I feel like this one is severely underrated. This one always gets hate, and people act like it's pretty much useless, but I think it's pretty good. I mean, like, it's not insanely hard to tame. You can kind of get it, like, mid-game, maybe after you get, like, a Megalodon or something, and, it's pretty good. It goes really fast. I think that's the best part of it. It's insanely quick. If you need to get around the ocean fast, this is one of the best ways to do it. But the thing is, it's insanely hard to hit with, which is why I have to put it so low on the when it comes to underwater creatures anyway. Trying to hit this thing is pretty much impossible, and it doesn't really do a ton of damage. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, obviously, it's pretty big, so it's going to deal some decent damage, but it's also super hard to hit with. There's just better underwater alternatives, but at the same time, I do like this thing for travel. It goes pretty quickly, so I don't know. Next up on the list at 82, we have the Pelagornis. Now, this one is a flyer. It's not really the greatest flyer. I mean, it's a decent speed, and you can go on the water, which is kind of cool, but the main ability I like this thing for is it gathers a ton of organic polymer. If you, like, kill penguins and stuff, you can harvest the organic polymer from them, and you get a ton of it. Like, it's insane. And, of course, I don't like making normal polymer. I'm too lazy for that, so just going and slaughtering some penguins and harvesting it with the Pelagornis is the best way, in my opinion. You just get so much organic polymer from it, and it has a weight reduction on organic polymer too, even though it doesn't really weigh that much to begin with, but it's still a nice bonus. Number 81 is the Parasaur. The Parasaur is pretty great for the early game. I mean, it has the ability to basically like scare off small creatures like raptors and stuff with the little like roar it has, and then it has the scan ability so it can scan things nearby. I think the scan thing's probably more useful in PvP for like if people trying to raid your base, but it's still useful in PvE for dangerous creatures that come around. So overall, I mean, the Parasaur is one of the best early game creatures, but why I have it in the 80s is because once you get out of that early game stage, you never use it. But at the same time, it's always like the first go-to tame in the early game, so it's pretty good. And number 80 is the Sabertooth. I think this one is really great. It's a little bit underrated now. I feel like people don't use it as much, but I think it's great for caving. Like, if you want to get some of your first caves done, this is a great way to do it. And you can get Sabertooth saddles pretty easily, and you can even get some, like, really great Sabertooth saddles on a supply drops, like, pretty commonly. I usually always have a ton laying around, so you can get a really great, just armored up saber, and you can go into some caves and take it down pretty easily. It also is one of the best chitin gatherers in the game. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but you get a ton of chitin with this thing, so pretty much when you go into a cave with this thing, you'll never need to worry about chitin. Except for there's a few other creatures that are better that we'll come talk about later. And number 79 is the Dinopithecus. This one was added in the first ever creature vote for Ark's Survival Evolved, and it's a pretty good creature. I mean, it moves really quickly, it jumps super high, you can climb walls with it, even though the climbing's a bit janky on this thing. It's kind of weird, but, you know, other than that, it's pretty good. And it actually, like, it acts like a Rex, or at least, people, like, the creatures around you basically think it's a Rex, I guess. That's probably a bad way of explaining it, but basically that means a lot of the creatures will just completely ignore you on this thing, even though they shouldn't. They should be attacking you, which means you can walk past a ton of them, especially in caves and stuff, which is pretty good for caving on this thing. Number 78 is the Featherlight, the first of the light pets. I'm gonna have all the light pets just clumped together because they all pretty much do the same thing. They just have a little bit difference when it comes to their stats, but I'm just ranking them on how much I kind of like their appearance. And first off is the Featherlight, and just because it's the lowest of the light pets doesn't mean I don't like it. I think the Featherlight's cool, but it's probably my least favorite out of all of them. And number 77 is the Glowtail. I like this one a little bit more than the Featherlight. I don't know, I think the lizard is kind of cool with like the little wings, I guess those things are in the back. It's just a nice shoulder pet overall. It's like a little gecko or something. I do like the look of it quite a lot. But at number 76 is the Bulldog. Gotta be one of my favorite light pets and one of my favorite shoulder pets, even though there's quite a lot of great shoulder pets coming up. This one is just pretty cool, and it's pretty easy to get because you find it in the green zone in Aberration. It's one of the most common ones to find. Super easy to tame. I mean, all the other ones are pretty easy to tame other than their locations, but the Bulldog is pretty cool. It's definitely one of the best. But my favorite out of all the light pets at number 75 is the Shinehorn. I think it's just the cutest of all of them. It's like a little goat with the horns, and the horns light up. I really like it. It's definitely got to be my favorite shoulder pet. Dude, and you find it in the blue zone too, so once you get to the blue zone, you can pretty easily tame them. Unlike the Featherlight, where you got to go all the way down to like the red zone in order to tame one. This one you get the blue zone, which isn't too hard, and it's pretty cool. At number 74 is the Bronto. This one's also, I feel like it's kind of underrated. People don't use it, but I think it's like the best berry gatherer in the entire game because it just has a huge area of effect with its tail. You swing its tail in like that huge radius, the entire radius, all of the bushes just go away and you get a ton of it, as well as it has like a crap ton of weight, so you can carry a ton of berries, meaning you can get as much narco berries to make narcotics as you could possibly need. Number 73 is the Fedora Hawk. This has got to be one of the top shoulder pets in the game. And basically what it does is when you die, it brings your stuff back to you, which is pretty awesome. I mean, you can't really complain about that. You don't even have to really worry about dying because it'll just bring it back to you. As well as it also shows you like creatures that are low on health and stuff, which is quite cool. Some people could argue ranking these higher, but like I said, I'm probably going to rank most of the just regular mounted creatures higher than shoulder pets, but I still think this one's pretty cool when it comes to the shoulder pets overall. Next up at 72 is the Shastasaurus. This one is an interesting one, as I kind of wish I could put it higher, as it's a really cool creature. It's basically going to have a submarine saddle, so it's like a submarine for Ark. You can put your dinos in it, you can travel around the ocean with it, and it's got a ton of abilities, but like a lot of the abilities are more PvP oriented, so for PvE it's not as useful, but the submarine is very good in PvP, I think, especially for underwater. But it is a tech saddle that you need, and it does take element, I believe, so that does make it a little bit harder to get. I mean, I would like to use this thing maybe in the late game, but now it's like extremely late game because you need tech to get it. Now you can get it from supply drops and crates, so I guess it is a way to get it early, but at the same time that's not like a guaranteed method of getting it. The point is, it's super late game, and that kind of makes it to where most people aren't going to get access to it, meaning it's not really going to be the best of underwater creatures, especially by that time, because there's a lot of better underwater creatures you can get before this. It's kind of just a fun thing to mess around with the submarine. And number 71 is the Otter. The Otter is one of the greatest shoulder pets. I mean, it's got two main abilities that make it awesome. First is the insulation. Basically, you know, it gives you insulation to the cold, and I think the heat too. Might be wrong on that, but it works really well in Arctic environments, so you can survive in there, even sometimes without even wearing fur armor if you have a good enough otter. But that, like, basically put together with fur makes it to where the otter is great for that, as well as it can hold as many artifacts as you want, so you don't have to grind going through caves over and over and over again, as you can just put all your artifacts inside the otter. So this thing is got to be one of the best shoulder pets. One annoyance though is you only eats fish, and sometimes I don't have fish and I have to like go out and kill the fish and get it to feed it, so that's kind of annoying, but you know, it's kind of just a you know, little nitpick. And number 70 is the Rock Golem. The Rock Golem, I think, is just pretty decent in PvE. Like, I mean, it's really strong. It is a little difficult to tame. It's more of late game, but you can use it to harvest stone, I guess. That does work. It is really strong. You can use it to go to the wyvern trench. If you wanted to, you can basically get all the wyverns out of there with it. That's about the few uses that it has in PvE. It still is pretty fun and is really strong too. I don't really know. I feel like it's way more useful in PvP and will probably rank way higher in that, but there's just not in too many uses I would want to use the rock golem. At number 69 is the Ichthyornis. This one's a pretty good one for the early game. It's pretty easy to tame. It's just a passive tame where you just feed it some meat and then you'll have it. It's really quick. The thing is, it doesn't really do much damage at all, so it's mainly just for getting around the ocean in the early game pretty quickly. I think it's a pretty good creature for doing that. It's definitely like one of the first ones you can get super easy in the ocean, and you'll be able to get around really quickly. At number 68 is the Moss Chop. So this has got to be one of the best starting creatures in the entire game. For the early game, this creature is phenomenal. Basically, it's like a passive tame, and it asks for a random food. And if you have that, you can tame it up pretty quickly. And once you do, it's got basically is great at harvesting. It harvests fiber, which is pretty much the only early game creature that harvests that. So if you're having trouble getting fiber, this thing will harvest a ton of it. As well as there's a ton of different resources you can upgrade its harvesting for, and just a lot of like niche resources that it can harvest too. So you can even use this for late game for getting those certain types of resources you need. And number 67 is the Angler. This is just a simple knockout tame, and it's not the best for fighting or anything. It's mainly just used to get silica pearls. It's like the only creature that can harvest silica pearls, and it harvests an absolute ton. Like, you'll pretty much never need silica pearls again if you go to the right spots. So for that reason, I'm going to rank it pretty high compared to everything else so far, because silica pearls are very useful, and it's pretty much the only way to get them. Number 66 is the Direwolf. This one is a pretty good one. It's good for caves. Only problem is you can't put a saddle on it, but in packs they get a lot stronger. So it's pretty good. If you have a pack of them, you can bring them in and wipe out a cave. So that is a good use for the Direwolf, as well as it can sniff out Explorer Notes. It can also sniff out Purlovias, which is good for the ice cave, so you can kind of see where those are, which I think is another just nice bonus of this thing. And number 65 is the Beelzebufo, the giant frog. This one, I mean, it's not the greatest. I mean, you can use it for travel, I guess, because it can jump around, but the main ability it has is if you kill like things that give chitin, like a Meganera and stuff, it will actually give you cementing paste, which is just absolutely phenomenal. You get tons of cementing paste, and that's a really annoying resource to try and get that you can't really farm well. I do like getting it from beaver dams, so that kind of, I usually, if there's not any beaver dams left, then I'll use the Beelzebufo. So that's why I don't have it ranked any higher, is because beaver dams are just so effective at getting cementing paste. But if you go to like the swamp cave or something where there's just thousands of bugs in there, you can get so much cementing paste, and it does bonus damage to them too, so it's great for that. And number 64 is the Oasisaur. This one is of course in Scorched Earth on Arc Ascended, and it's pretty good, but it's not the greatest creature ever. I know people thought it was going to be insanely overpowered when it was announced, but I don't think it's insanely broken. It does have a ton of abilities though, but of course, once again, it is a really late game tame, and also it's kind of hard to keep alive because you have to feed it potted plants, which is a really big chore, so not exactly easy to keep this thing, and not exactly easy to tame it either. Once you do get it, it will basically make resources on its back for you, so you can harvest those resources, or you can just get them, you don't even have to harvest them. And then it also has like crop plots on the back, or you can put crop plots on the back and they will automatically fertilize for you, so you don't have to put fertilizer in there, which of course is an annoying thing to do, so it's nice that it does that for you. There's also the pool, which will give you some buffs as well if you stand in it, and the main ability is it brings creatures back to life. They added like the souls or whatever, so if you have a soul from a creature that died, you can bring it back to life, which is also a pretty nice bonus of this thing. I don't think it's insanely overpowered though, especially with like breeding lines and stuff, because if you have a breeding line creature that's super overpowered, you can just breed another one and you don't have to bring it back to life, which is one of the things that people were saying would be overpowered. But yeah, if you already have a breeding line of a creature, then you can just breed another one. But for creatures that are more sentimental value, I think that's good for bringing them back to life though. And number 63 is the Equus. I think this one is a just really good starter tame. I mean, you do need to get rock carrots if you want to tame it efficiently, but you can do it with berries, I guess. It still is a great early game tame though. Even past once you tame it, it's got a few good abilities. First off, it has the lasso, which you can lasso creatures as well as unconscious creatures. If, say, they land in the water or something, you can move them out, which is great. It also has a weight reduction on a ton of different resources, like stone and stuff like that. It also has a mortar and pestle in its saddle, so you could build stuff on the go. which is quite nice, or at least things that are in mortar pestles, so it's quite nice. And number 62 is the Sarco. This one, I really like this one. I don't know if this is controversial putting it this high, but I think it's a good spot. First off, it's super fast in the water, and of course it has unlimited breath, so you can use this thing as a great underwater mount to go pretty far, and it does some decent damage too on land. It's got that 360 like bite attack, so you can use it on land, but it's mainly underwater use. It's great for going across the oceans if you don't feel like, you know, doing some huge underwater taming. You can just tame a Sarco and then go underwater and go tame something better for the underwater, but it's a great easy way to just go into the underwater biomes. Number 61 is the Dinosuchus, the newer one that was added recently. Of course, was in the Arc Editions mod, but is now official. This one is basically the Sarco, but even stronger and a little bit slower. So you can use it as an underwater mount, but it's going to be slower. But like I said, it's a lot stronger, and it also has the ability of the Gigabyte. Basically, if you like hold down the button, it will charge it up, and then once you do it, it'll do a ton of damage. So you can kill stuff with that pretty easily, as well as it has the Tail Whip to knock things back. And overall, I think it's pretty good. And this and the Sarco are pretty close. Like I said, the Sarco is good for speed, but this thing is way better for damage. And I just really like the Dinosuchus quite a lot. I'm really glad they added it to the game, as it's just a really cool creature. But I think this is probably as high as I could put it. At number 60, we have the Megalodon. This is one I've never really liked throughout Arc, but over the past year, I think I've grown to like it a little bit more, mainly because of some of the changes it's had in the last few years. In packs, it has pack buffs, so you can use it to actually like just go through caves and annihilate them, but then you get to tame a bunch of them, so that's kind of annoying. But if you just have one, it has the bleed attack, which is super good, and you can even use it to take out alphas and stuff, which I think is a great use for it. But of course, some of the downsides is it's not really the best underwater creature. There's a lot better ones out there. It has got some decent speed. It's not really that fast, and you can get kind of overwhelmed with it. And number 59 is the Procoptodon. This one's actually really good, especially on maps where you can find them. Some of them are really rare, like on the island and stuff you can't find them, but on Scorched Earth you can find tons of them, as well as like the Arctic biome and Genesis Part 1 you can find them. And once you do find them, I mean, they're really good. They jump insanely far. They're amazing for travel. You can run really fast with them. It also has the kick, like knockback ability, which is great. You can also put like small dinos in its pouch and then babies in the pouch as well. And if you have a male and a female, you can get an imprint buff on those creatures, which is another good reason why it's up just a little bit. Is all those abilities together make this thing super useful, especially for travel. And number 58 is the Beaver, or the Castroids. This one used to be like my favorite for getting wood, but over the years and with new updates and stuff, there's been a lot better creatures for getting wood. So I would have ranked this probably higher a long time ago, but now it's not as good, but it's still really great. I mean, you can get a ton of wood. It has a weight reduction, as well as that has a smithy on the saddle, which is a nice bonus. But you can just harvest absolutely tons of wood with this thing. It also gets tons of berries too, so if you want to harvest berries with this thing, you can do that, and it's pretty good at it. Number 57 is the Gas Bags. This is one, I think other people would rank it higher. I think I ranked it pretty high, but I don't really use it as much as other people. But what it's good for is it has a ton of weight. It's got like one of the highest weight stats in the entire game, which allows you to just fill it up on as much resources as you want. If you want to go on metal runs and stuff, it's going to be great for that, because you can hold an absolute ton of it. And it also can fly in the air with the Fart Bubble ability. Not only does this have the weight thing, but it's also good in early game, like in Extinction and stuff, where you can get access to it. It's a pretty good early game tame, so it doubles up as an early game tame that's really good for travel, as well as a late game tame for its weight. Number 56 is the Volanosaur, another Extinction creature. This one is pretty good. Basically, it shoots needles out of its face, and it deals a ton of damage. You can use this thing for early game orbital supply drops and killing a lot of stuff on Extinction, but other maps that have it, it's just really great too. You could even use it for caves and stuff. I think this creature is all around really good. And number 55 is the Morellatops. This is a really great starter tame on Scorched Earth, and I think it's great for any map you can get it on for a few reasons. First off, it's pretty quick. You can outrun a lot of creatures. It's pretty strong too for an early game tame. You can actually kill a lot of stuff and defend yourself. It also has access to water. You can hold water, and it's like the back little pouch thing, and you can drink from it, as well as it irrigates things nearby. So if you are not near like a lake or anything, you can use this thing to irrigate crops and all of that stuff. I think it's just a great creature overall. It's a great starter tame in the early games of Scorched Earth, and any other map you can get it on. It's definitely worth taming. And at 54 is the Andrewsarchus. This one is a great early and late game tame, mainly because in the early game it's pretty easy to tame. All you need is like honey, and then once you get honey, you can tame it and have it. It takes no saddle either, so you don't have to like build a saddle or anything for it. But of course, once you're ready, you can build the turret saddle, which is really strong, especially if you get a good quality one. You can use this thing for caving, which is great, especially on Fjordur where the map is from. You can use it on caves there, and the turret is pretty good bonus too if you want to kill like flying creatures or stuff that's coming at you. It's pretty good. And number 53 is the Dire Bear. This one has a few uses. First off, it's really strong. You can deal a ton of damage with it, as well as it has like the speed ramping thing. You could actually use it for travel if you did want to, but it also gathers honey. This is my favorite way of getting honey in the game because it's just super easy. You just go up to the honey and smack it, and then you have it, and you don't have to deal with it. It's pretty great. And this thing overall I think is a really great creature. It also has insulation, so when you're riding it, it gives you insulation from the cold, so you can survive those kind of biomes as well. And number 52 is the Megalosaurus. This one is really good, but it does have a downside, and that's that during the day you can't use it as it needs to sleep and it's pretty much useless. But on Aberration, I think is where this map shines, or this creature shines, as it is insanely strong. It's like one of the best creatures on Aberration, I think, because you can use it for boss fights. You can also use it for killing anything. You can get a pack of them and go down to like the Rock Drake Den and just annihilate everything. I mean, these things are absolute powerhouse on Aberration, and on other maps. I mean, during the night you can use them too, even though they're pretty rare. At number 51 is the Gigantoraptor. This one is a pretty great one, added recently, and of course now that we're like near the top 50, all these creatures are pretty good. Of course the ones behind, just because they're in the 50s, like I said, it doesn't mean they're bad. They're pretty good now. But the Gigaraptor is one I think a lot of people probably like more than I do, so I'm probably ranking it lower than a lot of people would, but it is pretty quick, and it's mainly used for like babies, so you can locate wild babies with the like call, but it also has the ability to imprint on them and have eggs and carry babies in its saddle, as well as you can pluck feathers from it to basically like the feathers allow you to get a certain stat, have a mutation like increased percentage buff, I guess I said that right, and then you put the feather on the creatures you want to have better mutations, or not better, but a higher likely chance of a certain stat being mutated. So it's pretty good for that, especially if you're wanting to do some mutating. You probably want to get one of these guys. But now we're in the top 50, and starting off number 50, as you can see, is the Iguanodon. This has got to be like one of the best starter tames. I feel like I said that for a lot of creatures, but this is definitely one of the best ones. You can find it on pretty much almost every map, and it's phenomenal. I mean, first off, if you run on all four legs, you don't run out of stamina. You have infinite stamina, so you can run as far as you want. If something's chasing you, it's probably not going to be able to catch you because this thing is pretty quick, and of course, it doesn't run out of stamina ever. It deals a lot of damage when you're on the two-legged stance, with a little like thumb attack it does, where it like sticks its thumbs inside of it, but it's really good for that. It also can turn berries into seeds, so that's just a nice bonus as well. I mean, it can harvest berries too, so you can use it for that. I mean, the Iguanodon is just pretty amazing, and definitely the best starter tame. If there's Iguanodons near you, any map, is definitely like something you should be going for because it's super useful. But at 49, I have the Ravager, I guess another starter tame, but this one is phenomenal for Aberration and maps you can find it on, because, I mean, first off, it's super quick, it deals a ton of damage, as well as it has a bleed attack. It has a weight reduction on a ton of different resources, which is great. It can also travel on zip lines and other stuff. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because Aberration just came out on Arc Ascended, but at the same time, the Ravager is really phenomenal on all the maps it's on. It's definitely a great tame to go for, and I guess it's not super starter tame because it is level like 50 saddle, but it's still great. And number 48 is the Mosasaur. This one is pretty good, but it's not the best of the underwater creatures. I wish I could put it higher, as the Mosasaur is just really cool as a creature itself, but the thing is, it's kind of in need of a TLC update. It only has the ability to bite, and its turning radius is kind of bad. It is pretty strong though, and it's got a lot of health, and it's got some decent speed, so it's not the worst. But the thing is, it can be stung by jellyfish and eels underwater, which are a big problem because jellyfish and eels are pretty much everywhere, and jellyfish just straight up dismount you and pretty much make it impossible for you to fight back. It does have a tech saddle though, which is kind of nice, but yeah, this one's pretty good. And number 47 is the Terrajapa. This one is a pretty good one as well. It's not the best flyer, but I think I like it a lot. It's got like 360 turning radius. You can go in all different directions, up and down. It's also got a tech saddle too, which is a nice bonus. It's a 3-seater saddle, and you can land on walls and use weapons on those as well. Overall, I think it's just a pretty good one, but it's not the easiest. I mean, it is a bola. You can like bola tame it, but it does like flee the second it sees you, so it's not exactly easy to tame, but it's not super hard either. I just think it's a pretty good all-around flyer, but not the best. And number 46 is the Dunkleostusis. This is a great underwater creature. I mean, it's got some decent health and decent damage, but it's really slow. The thing it does, though, is it harvests a ton of different resources. You can harvest stone, metal, oil, any underwater thing pretty much, except for like silica pearls. But you can harvest all of the rocks and minerals and stuff like that underwater, and you can get a ton of it. You can use this thing to harvest a bunch of stone as well. Overall, it's just really great for harvesting underwater. But after that, at 45 is the Trike. This one's a great starter tame, super easy to tame, and you can harvest tons of berries with it, as well as it's pretty strong too and can defend itself. I mean, I think almost everyone's tamed a Trike, which is why I have it so high, even compared to some of the other creatures. And number 45, I think, is a good spot for it, but there, of course, there are a lot of better creatures. Once you get past the early game, you don't need it as much. Number 44 is the Tropionathus. This one is basically like a Terradropper reskin, but except it has like the jetpack saddle on it, so you can boost forwards and go insanely fast, and it just runs on gasoline, so you can go pretty quickly. Thing is, it's not the strongest creature in the game, so you can't really defend yourself like really well. I mean, it can kill some creatures, but it's not the best for that. It does have the grenades on the saddle though, which is kind of fun, but more useful for PvP and blowing up bases. In PvE, the grenades on the saddle isn't as useful. It's just kind of fun. But the jetpack saddle is great for traveling because it makes it one of the fastest travel mounts. But it also is really difficult to try and tame this thing. You can't really get it that early game. Number 43 is the Yeeling, a new creature added to Aberration, and this one's great for Aberration as it can glide around, and you can get it before Rock Drake. You can use it to go get Rock Drake eggs and glide in there and then glide out really quickly. You can also just glide around Aberration, and I imagine on other maps this one will be pretty good too. I mean, you could just glide around and get around pretty quickly around the map, so I think this one's overall pretty decent. It's also got the feathers you can shoot things with, so that's also a nice bonus. All around, I think I like the Yeeling quite a lot, but of course, there's a lot better creatures. It's not the best for travel, it's just pretty good, and it's mainly great on Aberration. And number 42 is Cosmo, another new creature on Aberration. This one's part of the Bob's Tall Tale DLC. But this one's really great as well. It's a shoulder pet. Gotta be, I think it's the second highest shoulder pet on this list. It's beat out quite a lot, but you can basically swing around like Spider-Man, making it kind of like a grappling hook that you can use all the time. And it's probably a little bit better than a grappling hook, as you can like reel yourself in and out, as well as just swing super fast around the area, but you can't really swing like that with the grappling hook. And also it has the ability to shoot webs to slow things down, and if you can also use it as a whip as well. You can kind of like whip the like thing, so it works exactly like one. You could pick stuff up with it, or you can just slow creatures down that you want to move or whatever with the whip mechanic. Number 41 is the Quetzal. This is one that isn't as good as it used to be. It used to be like number 1. Of course, that was a long time ago. But of course, with the flyer nerf ages ago and the like RG TLC and all that stuff, the Quetzal just isn't as good as it used to be, even though I still really like it a lot, and it's got some function that I think make it really great. First off, the platform saddle. You can basically like build a giant platform and move a ton of creatures at once, which is great if you don't have access to cryopods. And also you can pick up very large creatures with it, which allows you to tame them super easily, as you can just drop them into traps, or if you have 2 players, you could hold it in your hand, and then you could have another person like trank it out, so you can tame creatures that way super easily with it. As well as it just has a ton of weight. You can move tons of stuff around with the weight of the Quetzal, and I still think it's a pretty decent, but it's not nearly as good as it used to be. And number 40 is the Tuso. This is got to be one of the best underwater creatures, as it's just really strong. It's definitely the strongest underwater creature. It does a crap ton of damage, and it's got a lot of health as well. It's super tanky. It's a little hard to tame. You need black pearls to tame it, but once you get it, I mean, it's just a phenomenal underwater creature, and it is really strong. You can use it in the caves and stuff and all of that, but I think there is one underwater creature that beats this one out that's a lot better. But I mean, this one, it's pretty phenomenal. But after that, we have the Pyromane at number 39. This one is pretty strong. Maybe I could rank it a little bit higher, but I'm not going to. It's basically like a Shadow Mane, but on fire, and you can like throw it on your shoulder too, and then you can throw it off your shoulder whenever you want, so you can kind of just have it, which is pretty nice. It's a lot better than the Ferox in that way, because you don't have to use element or anything. You can kind of just, whenever you want, throw it off, and then you'll immediately start riding it, so you'll be able to defend yourself. You can use this thing like in caves and stuff. This one's mainly a PvP one, I think. This one's really great in PvP, but in PvE, I don't think it's as useful. It's still really great for, like I said, caves and killing other creatures and stuff like that, but I think there's a lot better creatures for PvE. But next up at 38 is the Spino. This one I wish I could put higher because of course I love the Spinosaurus, but I mean, it's kind of beat out by a lot of other theropods in the game, so it's not the best. It does have some good abilities though. First off, if you go in water, it gives it a buff in speed and damage, and that makes it really strong. If you do get one of these things, I mean, you could use it for meat runs and all kinds of stuff. It's also pretty fast on the four-legged stance, and it's a pretty good swimmer, and doesn't have an oxygen stat, I don't think, so you can swim underwater just fine. You can also use it in boss fights that have water in them. It's best for the ones that do have water in them because they get a huge buff, which makes them actually pretty decent for boss fights, but they're not good in all of the boss fights. After that, we have the Mantis. This one is a really great one. You can tame it on Scorched Earth or any map that's got like the desert or place with bugs in it pretty much. And once you passive tame it with like Deathworm Horns, this thing is great. I mean, it deals a pretty good amount of damage. You can put like saddles on it. You can also put gloves on it to give it extra armor, or you can put weapons in there like swords and stuff to make it stronger, or you can put different like harvesting tools, so you can harvest pretty much anything you want with the Mantis, as you just have to put the correct tool in its hand and it will harvest it for you. So overall, I think the Mantis is just a really great creature, and it's definitely like a fan favorite. And number 36 is the Carcanos. This is another great one. I think it's better than the Mantis though. Obviously, I mean, it's a lot bigger, a lot stronger, and I think the abilities are a lot more useful. First off, I mean, it's got the jump, which you can use to get around Aberration. It jumps super far and really high, as well as just insanely strong. You can attack with both arms, as well as it can pick up things with two things in its hand, so you can hold two dinos at a time, and you can also chuck them across the map, which is great for just moving creatures around Aberration or any map you're on, really. And number 35 is the Stego. This one is great, especially with the TLC changes they added, like, I guess it's like 4 years ago now. It feels like they just did that, but whatever. Yeah, the Stego with the TLC changes is great. It's got the like plate modes that you can change, and each one harvests a different resources. So one will harvest berries. This is the only creature, by the way, to have a weight reduction on berries. Actually, might be wrong. I think the Maywing might have it too, but the Stego definitely has it, and it works great. You can harvest, it's probably like the best creature for harvesting berries, as well as it also harvests wood, which you can also use this to harvest wood on Aberration. Is this and the Roll Rat are the only creatures on Aberration that harvest wood, so I like using the Stego now on Aberration for that, which is another reason why it's bumped up so high on the list. And also gathers thatch too, which is just great. There's so many different resources, and of course this is another one that also has a ton of abilities for PvP, but it's just got a ton of great PvE uses as well. And number 34 is the Mammoth. This one is very similar to the Stego in its abilities. It gathers wood, thatch, and berries once again, but I think it just gets a little bit more berries. This thing just, I find myself getting an absolute ton of berries, as well as I think I just get a little bit more wood with it, so that's pretty great. It also does a lot of damage. You can actually defend yourself pretty well, and it has that roar that does the like buff, as well as you have the drum buff as well, which are more PvP oriented, but you could use it in some battles, I guess, if you really wanted to. But after that, we have the Deinonychus. This is a great creature. This one's great for boss fights and cave running. And I think some people are probably going to be upset with how low I have it, I guess. I've never really used it as much as other people have, and maybe I should use it a little bit more, even though I still think 33 is a great spot for it. I mean, 33, all these creatures going on are just great, and of course they're only going to get better. But I think the Deinonychus is really good. You can use it for boss fights, and why it's so good in boss fights is it does a bleed attack to them, which is the only creature in the game that can deal bleed to bosses. But you can also use it for caves. It can climb up walls. It's a little bit janky though, it's not the best climbing, but it's pretty good for that. And at 32, we have the Pteranodon. This is another great one for PvE. It's super easy to tame. You just bowl it, knock it out, and it's like the first flyer you can get on a ton of different maps. It's one of the fastest flyers in the game, even though it's so early game and one of the easiest tames. It's got to be one of the fastest, which is one of the reasons why it's so high. Of course, even when you do get better flyers, they're still not as fast as the Pteranodon, so if you need to get somewhere quick, you can just fly there super quickly, and it's great for that. Only problem is it doesn't really have much weight and stamina, so other flyers beat it out in that regard, which ended up making the other flyers higher. And 31 is the Voidren. This is basically the tech wyvern, but honestly I don't think it's as good as the regular wyvern, and you'll see I had the regular wyvern a lot higher, but this one, the reason it's lower than the other wyverns and not as good as, first off, it's really hard to tame. You need mutagen, which is like one of the hardest resources to get in the entire game, as well as the breath ability doesn't kill at all, it just stuns, so you can't really deal damage with that at all. And it's also on Genesis Part 2, which I feel like is a map where you don't really need wyverns, as you have the tech suit when you spawn in, and all the other flyers and gliders are a million times faster than this, so I don't really find much use for the Voidren. Maybe if it were on other maps it'd be a little bit more useful, and maybe if it were a little bit easier to tame. At number 30 is the Daedon. This one is a pretty great one, just because of one ability it has the ability to heal creatures around it, which is super useful. There's not very many creatures that have that ability, and it's great, mainly for boss fights. You can use it during boss fights to heal creatures, but you can also use it after boss fights to heal them after the fight, so you can get them ready for another boss fight, or to heal them for anything. You can use this pretty much in any scenario, because there's tons of scenarios where you're going to get attacked and you need healing, and this thing will help heal you a lot faster. Only downside is it takes a ton of meat and you have to feed it like an absolute crap ton just to keep it there, but it's pretty good. At number 29 as the Astrodelphus. This is a great flyer, but the only problem is it's insanely late games. You do need a tech saddle, but you don't need to defeat a boss for it, I don't think. You just need to get really high level, so you got to actually do something to get those extra levels to like level 120 or something like that. But anyway, this one is great because it's one of the fastest flyers in the game. The jetpack saddle, very similar to the Tropio, except for this one's even faster, and you can use it underwater as well. So you can use it underwater and on land. I guess it would be in the sky, not land, but it has the lasers as well. This one was great for PvP, but of course PvE list once again. And I still think it's great for PvE anyway. It's a great travel mount and goes super fast, but it's not the best of the flyers, as it doesn't really have the like great weight stats and other things that I think are useful in flyers. And number 28 is the Baryonyx. This one is a pretty phenomenal theropod. Even though it's smaller, that's actually great because it means you can fit in caves and other smaller areas, as well as it can jump too, which makes it pretty agile. It's also just really strong, so you can use it for all kinds of different caves. It's one of the best caving creatures in the game. You can even use it in some of the Aberration caves as well. Also, you can use this thing to do the tail attack, which will stun things underwater, and it swims underwater as well and has like no oxygen stat, so you can breathe underwater forever, so you can use this as an underwater mount as well. And number 27 is the Reaper. This one is a great one as well. It's probably not as useful in PvE, but I still think it's pretty great, and I do love the Reaper. First of all, it's just a really cool creature. It's really strong. You kind of need a light pet in order to get past the like natural shield it has, so that just makes it really strong if there's no light pet in the area that you're fighting. As well as it has the jump. It can move very fast, making it one of the best in agile theropods, as well as it's got like the poison attacks and other stuff, and the tail whips that you can knock things back with. It's a really great and strong one, but the thing is, it's really hard to get, as you basically have to like get impregnated by a Reaper queen. And if you want to use this for boss fights, you can't really, because you can't make an army of them and you can't really breed them that well, which is a big problem with the Reapers. At number 26 is the Snow Owl, and honestly we're getting into like some of the top tier creatures of the entire game. There's just quite a bit of them, and I'm realizing when I make this list that are kind of essential, and the Snow Owl is pretty great. The things that hold it back from being any higher is it's not on a ton of maps. It also doesn't have weight reductions on anything, and it's not very strong, but other than that, it's a great creature. It's super fast. You can actually get speed like imprinted on, so you can even get it faster, as well as you have like the freeze ability, which will basically heal dinos around you, which is the other creature that can heal besides the Daedon, making this like a great way of healing. And it's honestly my preferred method, is I don't have to feed it a ton of meat. I can just go up there and freeze them constantly, and it's based off stamina, so that is a great way to heal creatures and is my personal favorite. It's also got the thermal vision too, which is just a nice bonus, and it's got the dive ability, so you go insanely fast if you know how to use the dive. But at number 25 is the Eutyrannus. This one is a great theropod. Its main ability is its roars. It has the fear roar, which will scare things away, which isn't as useful in PvE, but it's still pretty useful. And the main thing is the courage roar. You can use this to get a buff on resistance for your creatures, as well as a buff on damage, which is essential for boss fights. This thing is essential for any boss fight in the game, so which is why, I mean, it's so high. You need it for all the boss fights, but the thing is, it isn't the main like fighter of the army. It's just a part of it that you pretty much need. But this Eutyrannus is pretty great all around. And at number 24 is the Basilosaurus. I think the highest ranking underwater creature, and for good reason. This one is pretty much essential for underwater. It's the best one, I would say. First off, it has resistance to jellyfish stings and eels, which is great. You can't get dismounted or overwhelmed by them because they're not going to sting you and deal their like stuns or whatever. As well as it just deals a ton of damage, and it's super tanky. This thing has a ton of health, and if you go to the surface of the water, it heals super fast. So even if you take a bunch of damage from a fight, you can heal up really quickly just by going to the surface. Only downside is if you go too deep underwater, you start taking damage, but honestly, it's such a small amount that it doesn't even really matter. Like, I never find that being a problem at all because it's just such a little amount of damage. And number 23 is the Megatherium. This one is a pretty great creature. It's really strong, and when you kill anything that gives you chitin or just bugs, it will give you the like insect killer buff that gives you like a 300% damage increase and a huge resistance, making you stupidly strong. This thing is like the best caving creature. If you can get it into a cave with like a crop pod or just fit it in, you're pretty much going to destroy that cave, and there's going to be no problems at all. This thing is phenomenal. As well as you can use it for the Broodmother fight if you want. If you bring an army of these to the Broodmother fight, it's pretty much an instant kill because these things are great for killing that too. They get the insect killer buff and they deal so much damage to the Broodmother once they kill the little minions. So this is definitely a great creature. You also get tons of chitin. It harvests so much chitin. You just go into one cave and you'll never need to harvest chitin again. It also gets fiber as well, so there's some other bonuses. At 22, we have the Crystal Wyverns. These ones are pretty great. I don't think they're as good as the regular Wyverns, but they're fun. I mean, they're smaller. I think the Tropical Crystal Wyvern's a little bit faster if you put it in the water. They all have their unique abilities and stuff, but they're not nearly as strong as the regular Wyverns. And then their stats are a little bit smaller than them, so they're not as good, but they're still great. They're still Wyverns at the end of the day. And they're pretty good. They're definitely fun. They're really easy to tame. You could get them pretty early on in Crystal Isles if you want to, and that's a good thing for them as well. At number 21 is the gachas. I mean, these things are pretty phenomenal. They have crystals that come off their back, and they just give you resources. So you could get different ones that give you different resources, and you can build a farm of them, and you get tons of resources for it. You can also just have it to where they give you random items, so it's basically kind of like supply drops where you just get free items from it. So if you know how to use these things, you can get really great stuff from them. I've never used them as much as other people, so I feel like some other people that really know how to use gachas would probably rank them higher, but for me, I don't really use them a lot, even though I probably should be, but I do recognize how great the gacha is. And number 20 is the Doedicurus. This thing is pretty great. You can find it on almost every map, and it just got harvest stone. It gets a lot of it. Of course, stone is one of the most useful resources in the game, used for all kinds of stuff, so obviously something that harvests it is going to be super useful, and this is the best way to harvest it. It does, it has weight reduction on it too, so you can carry a ton of stone around. I mean, it's just great. And number 19 is the Cinema Crops, the highest ranking shoulder pet, and I think this shoulder pet alone makes all the other shoulder pets not as good, because why would you use the other ones when you could be using this? It's like literally makes you fly around, you can float up, you basically can tame one super early game and nothing is dangerous anymore, because as soon as you get attacked you can just fly up into the air and you can't be attacked anymore. Like, it's just so good. It's honestly a little bit overpowered. You can also glide with it too, so you can get over huge spans of areas. The only thing you have to worry about is its stamina. It also has the ability to scare things that are coming after you, so smaller creatures that are attacking you, you can just clap, and it will basically scare them off, so that's pretty nice as well. And number 18 is the Thylacoleo. This is another great creature. This one's great for travel. It's probably one of the best land traveling creatures, as it goes really fast. You can climb up any surface pretty much. You just go straight up it. And it barely takes any fall damage, even though fall damage isn't really a problem in this game because you can jump off right before you hit the ground, but still. It also has a bleed attack, which can actually work on Titanosaurs, so a lot of people use this to grind XP and get Titanosaur XP, which is just another great use for it, and you could use that early game to get a ton of levels. It also just does a ton of damage as well, and like, once again, the bleed attack helps. You can bring it into caves and wipe them out as well. I mean, the Thyla is just a pretty awesome creature. And number 17 is the Griffin. The Griffin is a great flyer. It moves pretty quickly, or really quickly actually, and it was the first one to introduce the dive, and the dive goes really quick. As well as if you time it right, you can deal a crap ton of damage with the dive while you're hitting them like midair. It doesn't really do too much damage except for that dive ability, which does a lot of damage if you know how to use it. It also has a two-seater, so you can have two people on here, and you can pick stuff up with the front claws. It's just a nice bonus, but the Griffin is a great flyer. And number 16 is the Ankylosaurus. This one is a pretty great creature as well. It mainly harvests metal, but you can also gather flint as well. It gets a ton of metal, and it has a weight reduction on it as well. Also, something I forgot to mention about the Doedicurus that the Anky also does is if you hold it, like with an RG or something, it'll actually auto harvest the metal and stuff that it's near, so you can automatically get it without even having to ride it, which is really cool. This thing also harvests crystal as well, and it has weight reductions on all of those resources. I don't know if it actually has it on crystal. I think it might not, but it's still great either way. But at number 15 is the Mana Garmer. This one is a really great travel mount. It's mainly a land one, but I mean, you jump super high and glide around, so I'm not really sure. Probably the fastest land mount if you do consider it that. It moves, like I said, insanely fast, and you can jump in the air, you can do the dashes forward, but it also has the Ice Breath, which is really powerful, and it can like freeze them in place, as well as just do a lot of damage, and you can boost around. I mean, the Mana Garmer, it's a really unique creature, and it's just so fun to ride around on, as well as it's just really good. It has been nerfed a ton. I mean, when this thing first came out, this would probably be like in the top 5, because it was like completely overpowered. I think people even used it in like the King Titan fight and managed to kill it with just a few of them, so this thing was really broken when it first came out. But still, even with all the nerfs, which were mainly oriented towards PvP anyway, it made it not as good, but still, it's really great. It's still really fun to ride around on. And number 14 is the Desmodus. This is just an amazing flyer. It's only on Fjordur though, which kind of sucks, but it is really fast. It has a dive ability, which of course all flyers that have dive abilities are great, which makes it go really quickly as well. I mean, it's got pretty good stats overall. It also has the Sanguine Elixirs, which you can make only in the Desmodus, and what those do is basically, if you use it around something you're taming, it will give it 30% extra taming on that, so it'll just speed up tames and help you get better taming effectiveness as well if you don't have as good food. So with all of that, the Desmodus is really great, as well as it's just really like mobile. You can move pretty much any direction, kind of similar to the Terrajapa, as well as you can land on surfaces as well as upside down. It also has night vision too, and like echolocation. I mean, it's just got so much stuff, and it's such a good creature. At number 13 is the Magmasaur. This is another great creature. This one has a few uses. I mean, it's really strong, it's really powerful. You can use it for like the dragon fight because it's resistant to the fire. I don't know if many people do that, but you can do that. I mean, you can use it to kill all kinds of stuff, as it's just insanely strong. It's also got the saddle that basically makes it to where you can ignore temperatures and stuff, but the main reason it's up here is it's the best metal harvester in the game. Like, it harvests so much metal and has weight reduction on it. It's really ridiculous. I mean, it's the best way for getting metal, and of course metal is like one of the most important resource in the game, I would say. So this being the best harvester of it, it's going to be pretty high. And after that, at number 12, we have the Bloodstalker. The Bloodstalker is a great travel mount, and it's really fun as well. I mean, you swing around. It's pretty much like Spider-Man, except for a creature in Ark. It's best on Genesis Part 1, where the map is from, because the map is kind of built for the Bloodstalker for you to use, but you can use it on pretty much any other map as well, and you can move extremely fast, even faster than most flyers if you know how to swing properly. You can also like bring things in with the webs as well, and I mean, it does some pretty decent damage as well. You can also hold like items, so you can use like the mining drill and stuff while you're on this and harvest resources, which is really cool. I mean, this has got to be one of my favorite travel mounts. It's just really fun, and it's super unique compared to like all the other things, which are usually just flyers or they glide. This one is just awesome. And number 11 is the Shadow Mane. This one was overpowered for a while and probably still is. It's mainly PvP, but in PvE it still has a ton of uses as well. I mean, it's really strong. It's one of the strongest creatures in the game, honestly. It's got so many abilities. You can like go invisible, and if you have males and females, they give each other different buffs and stuff, and you can buff each other with them. You can use it in boss fights, mainly for the Genesis Part 2 boss fight, but they work in all kinds of different boss fights, like the Master Controller boss fight, they work great in as well if you can manage to transfer them to different maps. It's great for travels. It moves super fast, and you can do the super far jump where you go in any direction super high. It's also a great swimmer. You can use it as an underwater mount, and it works great as well. Honestly, like one of the best underwater creatures, as it's just so powerful. Like the Shadow Mane does almost everything you want it to. It's really great. But moving into the top 10, we have the Rex. I mean, the most iconic creature. I had to put it high, but I mean, also it's just really great. One, it's on almost every map, so it's pretty easy to like get, and it's not super hard to tame either. It's just a knockout tame, and once you get it, it's a really strong creature. You can kill almost anything. I mean, there's lots of creatures that you can't kill, and it's one of the best, probably the best boss fighting creature, mainly because it just works in so many different boss arenas. Pretty much almost every arena you could think of, you can use the Rex for. There's a few exceptions, but a lot of them work with the Rex. You can use it for meat runs and other things, or just defending your base. Having something to defend is always useful. At number 9 is the Carcharodontosaurus. This one is phenomenal. I mean, it's great for the late game because of course you can only really tame it in the late game, but it's like one of the strongest theropods in the game, one of the strongest creatures. With this thing, you can pretty much kill almost anything you need to. As you kill more creatures, it kind of ramps up in damage, and it's probably one of the best creatures for orbital supply drops on Extinction, as well as the King Titan boss fight. You could use card charge in, and they would work well in that. Overall, I mean, they're insanely strong. You're not going to be able to be defeated by pretty much anything on most maps with the card char because it's just so powerful, it's so large, which makes it great for killing anything you need to, as well as defending. Nothing's going to be able to attack you on. At least in PvE, you're not going to have players raiding you, so you're pretty much unstoppable with the card char. And very similarly, at number 8 is the Giga, which I think is a little better than the card char. I mean, they're very close, they're very similar, and they do very similar things, but I like the Giga a little bit more, just because it's more of raw damage. It does a lot more damage. You don't have to ramp up the damage, so you can use it, and I think it's probably better for the King Titan fight just because of how much damage it does to it, as well as other things. Maybe not as good for orbital supply drops, but still, I mean, it's a great choice for that as well. They're both really good. I just like the Giga a little bit more. And number 7 is the Rhinion-Nantha. This one was like the last creature out of the Ark Survival Evolved, and it's like one of the best. Obviously, it's at number 7. It's a great creature. I mean, it's like one of the hardest to get, so it's super late game. That is a problem with it, and maybe why it doesn't rank a little bit higher, but once you get it, it's like one of the main flyers you end up using, because first off, it's so quick. You can get around the map super fast. It's got multiple cedar saddles, but it's got so many abilities. You can move around different like storage bins and other like placeable things, so if you have like vaults and stuff, you can move them with all the items in it too. In Ark Survival Evolved, you can't just pick it up after infinite amount of time, or if you have the 30-second cooldown and it ends, you can still move it, as well as you could pick up super large creatures like the Rex, which nothing else can pick up. I mean, I guess a Tuso could pick it up, but you know, not a flyer. And you could use that to even like put it in a taming pen or move it across the map if you end up taming one and don't have cryopods. It also has the like goo, or not the goo, like the resin that you can use to do different attacks and stuff, which I think is more useful for PvP, but it's still nice to have. But after that, at number 6 is the Therizinosaur. This is one of the best creatures in the game, and it's not even like insanely hard to tame. I mean, it is a little difficult, but it's more of like a later mid to late game creature, and that just does so much. First off, it's great for harvesting. I'd say it's like the second best harvesting creature in the game because it gets a ton of wood. It's like the best for wood. You can also harvest thatch with it. You can harvest fiber. You can harvest like chitin, meat, hide, everything, as well as it's insanely strong. You can use it to kill stuff, and it does so much damage with those claws. And it also was one of the best boss fighting creatures because it almost has like the same strength as a Rex, except for since it's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit more agile, and you can move it around. It's also better for the dragon fight because it's a herbivore, that which the dragon's like breath attack does more damage to carnivores than herbivores. It's also better for the overseer boss fight because it's more agile and you can get it through the tech cave. There's just a lot of reasons why the Therizinosaur is so good, and honestly, it might be a little bit better than the Rex when it comes to boss fighting. I said that the Rex was the best, but honestly, the Therizinosaur might be a little bit better. Only problem is I think you have to do a little bit more breeding just to get those stats in. And number 5 is the Tech Strider. This is the best creature for harvesting in the entire game, like no debate at all. The harvesting module, it harvests every single resource you could even like fathom, and it does it like the most efficiently. And I mean, you'll have just so much resources you won't even know what to do with it. It's the best way, and you can get the module to make it way less, as well as you can send it straight to a tech dedicated storage if you have those. So it has a weight reduction on like all the resources too with that saddlebags you can get. This thing is just like way too good. It's really overpowered, honestly. And number 4 is the Maywing. This is one of the best travel mounts, probably the fastest mount in the entire game, as you can glide, but it glides at like Mach 10, so you go insanely fast. You can get around so many maps. It's only on Genesis Part 2, Lost Island, and Fjordur, but on those maps, it's great, and then if you move it to other maps, you'll just be getting around them so fast. It also has like imprinting bonuses as well if you use it for like the babies, as well as you can also put babies in the saddle too, so that's just a nice bonus. But this is like one of the best travel mounts. It can't even fly, but the gliding is just so fast, it's great. It also has the ability to have every single egg of every single kibble type, so pretty much if you want every single kibble in the game, all you need is Maywings and you'll be able to have all of them. And number 3 is the Rock Drake. Now this one is really great as well. Some might say it's not as good as the Maywing, but this is my personal list, and I like the Rock Drake a little bit more. and I use it a little bit more, so that's why I'm ranking it higher, as well as just for some of the reasons after this. I mean, it's mainly great for Aberration. On Aberration, this is the only creature you're going to be using once you get it. I mean, when it comes to travel anyway. But on other maps, you can still use it as well. And it's really fun, as well as it's really great. And it also has like really great stats. It's got tons of weight, stamina, health. You can also use this in the Rockwell boss fight as well. It's the main thing I use for the Rockwell boss fight when I go to take out the tentacles. So not only is it great for travel and hauling resources and killing things, but you can also use it in boss fights as well, which is just another great bonus of it. It's got some other abilities too. You can use it to go up to the surface and get what are the supply drops, which you can also sense reapers when they're near you, which is a nice bonus, as well as it can go invisible too, which is also pretty cool. But after that, number 2 is the Argentavis. I mean, this has got to be one of the best creatures in the game, and the reason it's number 2 is because it's simply the creature I use the most in the game, and for that reason, I feel like it should be really high. I mean, it's not super hard to tame. It's more like a mid-game creature, and it's almost on every single map, excluding a couple, or it might just be Aberration, I'm not sure. But this one is great. Basically, it has weight reductions on so many resources that, like, it's all the resources you could possibly need that has weight reductions on. It also has a smithy in its saddle, so you can build stuff on the go. And the only problem with it is it's kind of slow, so that really bums it down, as it takes forever to get anywhere. But it's got tons of weight, tons of stamina. You can actually kill things with it. I've used this to kill alphas and stuff before, as you can kind of just circle around them and hit them, and you'll be able to kill them pretty easily. And you can pick up stuff, pretty large stuff as well, like Ankies and Doedicurus, which you can use. Those are the pair Ankies and Doedics is super useful as well, because you can move them around with the weight reduction, and it's great. But at number 1, I have the Wyvern. This is my personal favorite creature in the game, and there's some arguments to be made that the other creatures, some like the RG or maybe something else, could be number 1, but I think this one's the best for a few reasons. One, I mean, it's like the RG without the weight reductions and stuff, but the Wyverns have a lot of weight. I mean, they have more weight than the RGs just without the weight reductions, and they've also got really good stats overall, as well as they're just really strong. You're able to defend yourself, and when a mount that you're out all the time traveling with, it's great to be able to defend yourself. And with this thing, you could pretty much kill anything that attacks you, like with even like alphas and stuff with the breath attacks. The breath attacks are really strong, especially the one the lightning can just obliterate things. The only problem is you can't kill things like Karchars and Gigas and Titanosaurs and stuff, but that's very few set of creatures. It also has some bonuses as well, like the flap can knock things back, as well as you can harvest thatch with it, which is kind of nice. And you can also pick up stuff of pretty large size as well to move it around, which is great. Definitely bigger stuff than you can with the RG. Alright, I think the Wyvern, I mean, it's definitely my favorite creature in the entire game. But that's going to be it for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe, because I think this is my longest video ever. I'm pretty sure the second longest would be like my Aberration 100 days from a few years ago. That was like exactly an hour long. And this one I think is going to be an hour and 40 minutes. So yeah, this one's pretty long. If you guys did watch all of it, I'm glad you did enjoy it and make it this far and are listening to my rambling still. But anyway, thanks for watching, and bye.